Okay, so let's get started with an overview of how to improve your commercial real estate lease management webinar. This webinar will be recorded for future reference for others as well. And if you want to ask any questions, please note them in the chat, and I will try to react on those as well in the end of the webinar. So to get started with the overview, first I will explain a little of what Moderan is, so and why we're talking about commercial real estate lease management and how to improve that. So Moderan is a software for lease and property management, and more specifically, our focus is on giving customers an overview of their properties and spaces portfolio, improve their spaces management, then provide them with, as we see, the most extensive and flexible rental tool for convenient overview of leases and reporting. And then particularly popular recently has been our utilities calculation tool, which makes utilities calculation for complex commercial properties relatively simple, and the customers can do it in a matter of minutes as opposed to hours or sometimes even days that they might be doing now in Excel systems. So, and a bit more background in terms of our customers who we're working with. So we work with commercial, as we see a lot with innovative commercial real estate owners and managers in different countries of Europe, and we're happy to see that they trust Moderan to run their daily work. Just for more detail in terms of what our customers are doing, I would like to describe a few of our customers in a bit more detail. So, for example, one of our customers is Rotterdam City, which is an urban city quarter with a mix of office, retail, restaurant, hotel, any sort of property, any sort of tenants. And they're using Moderan to manage their daily leases. And yes, I think that they're most fascinating in terms of how well they have managed to combine different types of tenants. And also, I think they're an example of a current trend in commercial real estate in refurbishing old factory areas into new and trendy modern commercial real estate areas. And the second good example of our customer is Asgard Properties and their portfolio. So their innovative approach is something that we're also more and more frequently seeing among our customers, is combining the traditional office lease with the modern co-working setup. So yes, there are specialized co-working providers, but what we're also seeing is that because it's been a trend, so some of the office portfolio managers are also experimenting by enabling customers, tenants, to lease their spaces either or by desks or by square meters, essentially combining both. So we're happy to be able to support this sort of approach, this innovative approach also in B Nordic, for example. So in other words, what we're saying is that we're working with real estate managers that are really coming up with interesting and tenant-centered solutions for their tenants and concepts for their tenants. And our role is to provide them the tools, the software tools that they would need to do that. So now going forward, so just to start with, today I would like to stop on a few very common issues that are sort of the ABC of lease and property management, that by improving the efficiency in these processes, our customers and commercial real estate owners and managers can already win a lot, both in their revenues and their property value. And I will stop today on the 4 most common issues and show you how in Moderan we help them overcome these issues to improve and be more efficient in these topics. So getting started, the first and the most painful thing for any property manager that has at least 50 leases or even less is, of course, the scattered information in different Excel files, if they're still using Excel files, or if they're using older, outdated software solutions. And of course, with the scattered information, especially in Excel, this usually results in that waste of your property management team's time, because they have to constantly assemble data from different files. They're stored in different places and tend to start living their own lives, so to say. And of course, the one part is the time, but the other part is, of course, also the errors that come from manually transferring data from one file to another. So the solution is that the key part of effective lease management and overview of your real-time overview of your properties is to have all the property and lease information in one place, so that everyone uses the same data, not their own data sets. And once you have them all in one place, of course, the reports for any time in the near past or more distant past is really easy to access on just a couple of clicks. So as an example of how Moderan helps in this regard is our overview of the portfolio of properties. So here you can see a portfolio with multiple properties and the snapshot of the key metrics that anybody wants to know in real time for their properties. So what is the vacancy rate in my property? What is the total leasable area? How much monthly income I'm gaining from there? What is the average rent? How many tenants I have? How many contracts I have? And of course, this information needs to be up to date for any daily changes in the portfolio, especially if you have hundreds of leases, which many of our customers have. So I will come back to some of the views of Moderan inside Moderan software as well. But first, I would also like to cover the 3 other main key moments where the efficiency gains can be pretty quickly achieved with a good software. So the next issue, of course, is the spaces. It's been interesting for us to also see that this is, of course, a key issue for commercial real estate, because space, or what we mean by space, is basically individual units that the landlord is renting out to the tenants. So each tenant can have 1 unit or multiple units, and that is a specific feature of commercial real estate, is that unit is not a fixed thing in time. Every time a new tenant comes in, it might happen that the space that they will be renting will be completely rebuilt, which might also mean that the total leasable area might change. And all these changes in spaces need to be automatically reflected in all your portfolio reports in terms of total leasable space and their calculations. And more importantly, one of the key challenges that we're seeing with a lot of customers is making sure that these changes are automatically also reflected in your utilities calculations, because utility cost calculation is always based on the total leasable area or the specific tenant occupied leasable area. So keeping these in sync is a critical part of the process. And this is one place where Moderan is particularly useful. So as a solution, we provide an easy overview of the spaces. You automatically see the vacancies, the history, and you can reflect the space size changes, which are common in commercial real estate. So here's a snapshot of our spaces overview. You can instantly see that the yellow spaces are vacant at the moment. If the space is occupied, you automatically see which tenant is linked to this space and when is their end of rental period from the contract. So this gives you a quick snapshot, which you can see both on one property level or for your whole portfolios to filter out which spaces are vacant. So yes, spaces management, bringing clarity to the different spaces, and the total leasable space has also been one of the values that we have been able to help our customers with. And the third item, also very common, and quite honestly, I would say the first actually challenge that Moderan started out with when we started our work about 5 years ago, was helping customers make sure they are in control of all the key deadlines in the contracts. So this means both indexation windows, this means any notifications for negotiations before contract end period, contract termination. Also, in case there's insurance requirements, which is something that is very common in retail spaces, especially with restaurants, to make sure that these tenant insurances are actually valid. So basically keeping control of what are the deadlines and making sure you don't miss them. So to make sure of that, Moderan, of course, provides email reminders, but also a task list type of overview of the reminders. So here's an example of a classic deadlines review, where you see instantly all of your overdue, well, by first it's the next 2 months deadlines, because this is what you normally work with. But you also see overdues, because sometimes there are things that are not solved. You can't solve them immediately, but you need to make sure you don't forget about them. So for example, as you can see here, one of the tenant's insurances has ended. The landlord has asked for an updated insurance to make sure that they have one. The tenant has not sent in one yet, so it's a risk that the landlord has to keep in mind not to forget about. So this is why it's still here until this issue is resolved, or at least as a reminder that there's a risk in your property that you need to be aware of. And then the other reminders here are the classic things that you need to be ready for indexations that are coming up, also for the contract terminations, or any other sort of specific reminders that are important. Because the deadlines is something that costs commercial real estate, can cost potentially a lot of money. And this actually in two aspects. So the first aspect is, of course, the regular monthly revenue. So the classic example here is indexation. Most lease contracts define that indexation can only be done within a certain time window in each year. So if you miss that time window, you've missed this indexation for this year. You might have a new opportunity then next year, but the indexation increase that you were expecting from this tenant or this lease for this year will be lost, because in next year there's limits how much you can index the contract, and this accumulates across years. And what is more important is because property value is usually calculated starting from the total annual lease revenue. This means that if you lost 1,000 euros per year, let's say, in one contract indexations, then in terms of the property value, which is usually calculated as a multiplier of something between 10 to 20 times the annual lease revenue, it means that you might be losing 15,000 immediately from your property value already. So this is why, of course, the deadlines are a critical part of lease management for any commercial real estate portfolio, where especially since in commercial real estate, the lease terms are usually relatively long. Sometimes it might be shorter, but very classic is something like 5, 10, sometimes even 15-year leases where you need to control these deadlines. So now the fourth bet is something that we're seeing as a particularly important issue in Central and Eastern Europe, where utilities are calculated on a monthly basis. In Western Europe, especially Germany, where the utilities are agreed as a fixed rate per month and then are rebalanced at the end of the year. The day-to-day process is not that painful, but the rebalancing at the end of the year is also a challenge that a lot of the customers in Western Europe also struggle with. But of course, in Central Eastern Europe, where the calculations are done on a monthly basis, this is especially painful because it might take some customers, as we're seeing, that are working still in Excel, it might take from hours to days to get one large property utilities calculations and the splits and the fair shares calculated correctly. And the correct calculation is especially important considering that most of the contracts and by the law, the tenants actually have a right. If they find that the utilities split for them is unfair, they have a right to ask the landlord to provide a proof how the utilities were calculated to make sure that they get the fair share. And if they discover in this process that something was calculated for them unfairly, they actually have a right to ask the landlord to pay them for the miscalculated utilities for the years before. So this is why this poses a particular risk and actually needs to be taken care of properly and not left into the messy and time-consuming process that it often is right now. So for that, Modern has built a particularly commercial real estate specialized solution that offers a standardized setup, but at the same time, a very comprehensive exceptions management, because the key for commercial real estate utilities calculation, as we're seeing, is the ability to manage the exceptions, because it's a classic that with some tenants you have included the utilities in the rent fees, or some large tenants you make some sort of exceptions that they're not paying, and you have to be able to manage all these. So this is why Modern is particularly good at managing these exceptions while still standardizing the process. And this pretty much automates the process so that on a monthly basis, you just need to update what amount was charged to you by the service providers. You import the readings and basically review the results. So even for large properties that we're seeing in our customers, the monthly utilities calculation can be done in a matter of minutes. So here is an example overview of one actual property and how the result of the utilities calculation is presented. We automatically calculate both the individual share of each cost for each tenant, depending on the specific rules that are assigned for each cost item. We also then have, of course, a view by each tenant, and more importantly, we also have a view for you to revise what is the profit sort of statement of the utilities calculation. So how much are you actually paying for the utilities to your service providers, how much you're charging your tenants from these calculations, and what is the difference that needs to be covered by landlord, or in some exceptional cases, we've also seen that the calculation is all nicely zero and landlord doesn't have to cover anything. So all these options are enabled in Moderan as well. So now for a change, let's also see all this nice berry in an actual program. So I will switch now to Moderan software to show you how it actually looks in real life. So if you remember, this is the original view of the portfolio. So here you see the different properties and the key metrics. The picture is a bit different than you saw in my picture initially, because one of the conveniences of Moderan is also that you can easily redesign your view by dragging columns different places, and Moderan remembers it for each user individually. So this means that you can design your own best view how to better manage your portfolio. So here's the overview of the properties. Now, next, we can take a quick look at the spaces. So here's an overview of your whole portfolio and all the spaces in your portfolio. And now, if you want, you can automatically filter out saying...
I'm sorry, Kristi, we can't see your screen.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I think I forgot to put the sharing on again after switching. Okay, so now you see.
Yes, now it's good.
Yes, apologies for that. So coming back, so here's the overview of the properties. And as I mentioned, you can easily redesign your view by moving the columns around, and the program remembers it individually for each user. Now, the next part was spaces. So let's take back again the overview of all spaces. So here you see for now an overview of all the spaces in your portfolio, and you can easily filter out that show me only my vacant spaces in the portfolio. And now you see the vacant spaces in all the properties. If you want, of course, you can take at any time, you can just select one property. Let's take this property. And now you see only the spaces in this property. And then, of course, you can filter for vacancies in this property alone. So this gives you a really easy snapshot of the spaces. Now, the next part was that to briefly touch upon is the extremely flexible rental table. Again, here you can order the view yourself to make it more convenient for yourself. Then inside the contract, you can see all the terms, all the prices that you're charging to the tenant, and different views. And this rental table, then you can use for any additional reporting that you need yourself. But as I mentioned, we already have ready-made reports. So here we have a report about contract deadlines. Because I'm now using the filter for just one property, we see the upcoming deadlines for only this property. And as I mentioned, by default, it shows you the next 2 months because this is typically what you're working on. But you can always take all the reminders up to whatever year you have in your portfolio. So it's really make sure that this is sort of like a task list. So as long as you keep this list clean, you can be sure that all your reminders deadlines are taken care of, and all your agreements with the tenants are resolved. So that's a key here. And then, of course, we have some, as I mentioned, a lot more ready-made reports. So here's, for example, an example of, let's take first for the whole property, of the tenants by space type. So this also means that you get an instant overview by the different types of space that you have. So here you can also see that in addition to our predefined types, the classic types like industrial, restaurant, retail, office, and so on, you can actually define your own types of space. And the report shows you automatically what is the share of this space in your total portfolio. And more importantly, it shows you what is the average rent per square meter for this type of space. And then you can go and see in more detail. let's see, for example, office, which seems to be a big part, and then you can already see in more detail which contracts with which prices are included in these. So this is just one example of the ready-made reports that are always available for you. And as I mentioned, not just for today, but you can pick it for any dates in the past as well. So yes, ready-made reports is one of the sort of key aspects that we're seeing our customers saving time on. There are several reports that our customers have been saying that have taken them half a day to a whole day to prepare for any date before, when they were still using Excel tables. And now a quick overview also of a utilities calculation automation, since this is usually the most interesting part in countries that do the utilities calculation on a monthly basis. So for utilities, of course, you first select the property because they're done on the basis of property, and then the period, which is usually the month. And you automatically first see that the first thing that Moderan does, it automatically populates the list of tenants that were in the building with an active contract within this period. And it shows exactly the number of days that they were in the building, meaning that Moderan actually calculates utilities on a daily basis. So if anybody moves out, anybody moves in, they change space size, this is all taken into account by the daily basis. And then here you see also then all the costs calculated for each tenant. Also, you can see the split up between general consumption and individual consumption and what is the total. And then the second view that's also interesting, as we discussed, is the individual tenant-based view. So individual tenant-based view, you see for each tenant, what is for individually consumed meter-based consumption, you see the total consumption with units and the price. For general costs, we present the total number, since the calculation basis can be very different from a cost to another. So yes, this is the part that is then used for invoicing the utilities, or that can be fed directly also into the accounting systems. And now the second interesting part about the utilities is then usually the profit view. So here you see what you charge your tenants for each cost type, how much you pay for each cost type, and what is the difference in total. Are you getting more or less money? Both in euros and in percentages. Usually, as we see, of course, most landlords want to see a nice list of zeros here. But if you have vacant spaces, then typically these are also assigned some part of a general cost. So there's usually at least some information, some cost in here as well. Now, so this is just a brief glimpse into Moderan. I don't want to tire you too much with the demo. If any of you wants to hear more or see more, we're happy to do a special demo about that. But now coming back to our today's topic, I also want to summarize a bit into the topics that we discussed. So as I mentioned, the main sort of the four key aspects that help any commercial real estate landlord and property owner to maximize their revenue and asset value is taking care of these 4 pain points. So first of all, being sure that you have an overview and ready-made reports, so your team doesn't spend too much of their time just aggregating data. Then having a good overview of your spaces. We're still seeing this and working with several customers on getting their spaces organized. As I mentioned, this typically is the most key part when we're implementing utilities automation, because as soon as you start automating anything, you need to make absolutely sure that the base data is correct. So this is why we help them get their spaces overview organized very well. Then reminders and deadlines. So making sure you don't lose rent revenue just because you forgot about, or somebody in your team forgot to discuss with a tenant about the indexation, or even the worst case is that if there's any instance with a tenant, and for example their insurance has expired, then this might be an even bigger cost for you. And then the fourth point is the utilities calculation. We've seen a lot of customers saying that they resort to Excel-based utilities calculation because they haven't seen a solution that can cover the exceptions that are needed in commercial real estate sufficiently. So this is why when we started building the utilities section into Moderan, we spent close to a year investing and analyzing the different exceptions apologies, that are actually applied in commercial real estate. So we can say that as we're seeing, we cover at least 95% of those now. There are a couple of rare exceptions that that we want to also enable, but most of them are actually covered, and this is why our customers also love the utilities part, because it helps them make sure that the calculations are clear, and once the rules are set up, then pretty much anybody can get the calculations done by just importing the readings, adding the incoming invoices from service providers, and the proper calculations are all done. So these are the four pain points I wanted to touch upon in this webinar. Just as a few remarks about Moderan is the additional advantage that Moderan as a software has for commercial real estate management owners is because, as we like to say, it's like a step up from Excel, because as you could see in the views as well, it resembles in certain aspects the Excel, which is something that everybody's used to in lease management. Moderan is as flexible and user-friendly. So this is one of the definite benefits that our customers love. And because we use user-based pricing, so a lot of times you can start small with even one property. And as I mentioned, what we're seeing is that most of our customers are actually very progress-minded and innovative, which means that even if you start with one property, you probably have in mind to grow your portfolio. So we enable this growth by being there for you in the start with a cheaper pricing, but growing with you as your needs grow. And then, of course, the integrations. In today's world, all the machines need to talk to each other, so you don't have to do a lot of manual typing again. So this is why we work with a lot of different software providers that are covering aspects which Moderan is not covering. So for example, accounting. So all the financial calculations, of course, need to be fed into your accounting system, so you don't have to duplicate anything. Then secondly, because our focus is on the lease and tenant management. So for example, the facility management is something that is provided by our good partners. So we also integrate with them. And on our website, you can find a long list of partners that we already have in place and in negotiation. So it is nowadays it is a set of different solutions that you need to select to best manage your properties. And so yes, the idea of Moderan is to provide you both a very professional commercial real estate specialized but at the same time, easy to use solution that's really, really convenient. So that's a summary from me. Please do contact us if you want to demo or you want to discuss more how to improve your property management. And we're planning to have more of these webinars, also introducing our other partners and bringing other interesting speakers to our webinars.